Tonight, we're going to be talking about the ongoing struggle in Argentina between the workers and broader masses versus the newly elected far right government led by far right President Javier Milei. To start, I'm going to first cover the dire conditions that workers and oppressed folks in Argentina are facing currently. And then I'm going to briefly touch up on who Javier Milei is and the shock therapy that he's launched against the working class there, before covering how the masses are fighting back against Milei's onslaught, alongside how the revolutionary left is intervening in this struggle. And along the way, I'm going to convey what I believe to be important lessons to take from this ongoing struggle, and also from the strength of Argentina's Trotskyist left, that we in turn can take into our own organizing here in the imperial core. So, without further ado, let us get started. All right. So far right politicians like Trump, Brazil's Bolsonaro, and Argentina's Milei don't get elected president out of thin air. Their rise and ability to take power are accelerated by certain conditions in society that are enabled by the ruling bourgeois class. In Argentina, inflation is in the triple digits and was at a rate of 170% prior to Milei's election. Every year, Argentina also pays 19 billion in debt to its imperialist creditors through institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, with the working class footing the bill through the gutting of workers' taxes to fund social and welfare programs, and in turn diverting them towards funding this debt, aka austerity in a nutshell. Whoopee. A majority of Argentina's workers aren't unionized, and only about 40% of the working class there receive union benefits. The low rate of I can't say that word, unionization, and only increasing austerity measures heavily contributes to 40% of the population living in poverty. So the politics of Argentina's bourgeois state imposing these vile conditions are dominated by two political coalitions. Forgive me if I'm butchering this. The Juntos por el Cambio, translated in English to Together for Change, is a right-wing coalition of political parties whose views span from the center to the far right. The Union for the Homeland is a centrist coalition that currently holds the most seats in legislature, Jesus Christ, and the one I'm going to elaborate more on. Oh, wait. Oh, right. This is the same slide. Sorry, I completely got lost for a sec. The failures of the establishment parties to address the devastating conditions that workers face in the country has caused many in Argentina to desperately seek a political alternative and punish these coalitions for failing to meet their needs. Enter the libertarian, aka far-right coalition, La Libertad Avanza, forgive me if I'm butchering that, translated to Freedom Advances, which has the third most seats in Congress and was founded and led none other by the professional chucklefuck Javier Milei. A brief summary about the scrapped Marvel villain, Milei, before his political career and brief dip into the superhero business as General ANICAP. Milei was an economist as well as a talk show host for the radio show Demolish Myths, which featured libertarian right political and economic figures. Prior to libertarian in quotes. Prior to becoming the current president, he ran for and won a seat in Argentina's lower legislature before forming the current successor coalition that he won the most recent presidency on. For both of his campaigns, he took advantage of the widespread disillusionment amongst Argentinian society and centered his rhetoric on outing status quo politicians as useless, parasitic politicians who never worked, referring to them in short as a political case. Similar to how Donald Trump and his Republican allies rally with the rhetoric of defeating the woke, liberal, billionaire elites. However, as Argentinian Trotskyist Miriam Bregman puts it, Milei isn't a libertarian lion, he's a cuddly kitten of the wealthy and powerful. Politically, he's determined to ensure that the extraction of profit continues rigorously for Argentinian capital, as well as for its foreign investors, and that the costs of this are fully paid by the working class. He's determined to ally himself with the interest of US imperialism, and additionally, he is a proud Zionist and vowed to strengthen ties with Israel, who also recently returned from a trip there while the Zionist state continues its horrifying genocidal campaign against Palestine. Since coming into office, Milei has powered up his chainsaw and launched a full-on blitzkrieg against the working class. His shock therapy came in the form of announcing a decree to change over 300 laws, and soon afterwards an omnibus bill of 600 more changes. To summarize what these attacks entail, they are centered on accelerating austerity against the working class through means such as halting all public works projects and cutting subsidies for energy and transportation. The rights of workers and tenants are also under major threat from these attacks. Said attacks include the elimination of all price controls, making it illegal for workers to block entryways and occupy workplaces, essentially any form of militant action during strikes, and reducing funds for unions by making it optional for union members to pay their dues rather than being deducted from their paychecks. Additionally, for tenants, attacks include requiring rent payments in US dollars to make housing costs even more expensive, and eliminating an already meagerly enforced, I believe, 3-year lease minimum contract. There's a chance I might have read that wrong, but I hope I have the right info on that. Anyways, these vile moves against the working class are just a few rounds of ammo of the entire arsenal of damage that these initial policies intend to unleash. Anticipating the massive backlash to come, a wave of security measures have been introduced, including the threat to strip the welfare of any recipient that engages in protest, and preparing legions of Argentina's police forces to target roadblocks and other militant actions the masses engage in on the streets. Fortunately, a monster wielding a chainsaw is no match for the explosions of a mass workers' struggle led by a revolutionary party. And the seeds of an already sprouting plant are continuing to grow both amongst Argentina's masses and revolutionary left. On December 20th, 2023, 10 days after Milei became president, various left and workers' organizations called for protests against these austerity measures and gave the masses the opportunity to defy the increased repression by the state. That night, protesters in Buenos Aires, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, continued to march spontaneously while banging pots and pans, where the first calls for a general strike were made. 1 week later, the largest federation of labor unions in Argentina, the CGT, called for a demonstration in front of the national courts, which mobilized around 20,000 workers during the workday. On January 24th, the CGT and other unions called for a 12-hour national strike. Despite claims from state officials that the demonstrations were small and insignificant, an astonishing 1.5 million people were mobilized in the streets across the country. However, there were many shortcomings by the organizing of the strike by union leaders. Many sections of the CGT only mobilized their union delegates rather than entire workplaces into the streets. They also made concessions by keeping certain industries like public transit running and limiting the strike length to only half of a day. A general strike must be without a time limit if it is to bring any significant gains for workers and oppressed. It's important to elaborate that the interests for union bureaucracies and of the far right are one and the same. Both sections, as critical and hostile as they may appear towards each other, are united in serving the interests of the ruling class. Union bureaucracies exist to serve a contradictory purpose. On one hand, they must provide an outlet that empowers workers to fight for better conditions in their workplace. Yet at the same time, it must do everything it can to limit the sense of empowerment so they can meet the interests of the bosses. Union leaders are also given material incentives to enforce these limits, as they are given much higher pay and benefits than the rank and file workers they claim to represent. In turn, these leaders and their reformist political allies in the state play a huge part in bringing about the disillusionment from their intended failures amongst workers and helping to breed the desperation and resentment that turns a portion of them towards reactionary politics. To defeat the far right, we must also defeat the manipulative practices of reformists and union bureaucrats co-opting struggles to uphold the interests of the ruling class and instead put forth a revolutionary Marxist alternative for workers to embrace, or for workers and oppressed peoples to embrace. In spite of the failures of the unions, a good portion of the masses were brought out through means of independent organization from capitalist institutions. Workplace and neighborhood assemblies have been popping up in the capital and other parts of the country, which have provided space for workers, unemployed, and other folks fed up with Milei's attacks to voice concerns, participate in discussion and debate, and democratically decide how to participate in the struggle. Although these assemblies don't yet have the capabilities to seize control of production and society from the ruling class, they are nonetheless boosting the confidence in portions of Argentina's working class in their ability to organize and govern themselves against the capitalist class, as well as providing an opportunity to expand their presence to more of the working and oppressed masses. The emergence of these embryos of self-governance have been able to form partially because of the dedicated support from Argentina's revolutionary left. The work and dedication of Trotskyist organizations in Argentina have put them in an only increasingly powerful position to be able to make successful interventions in mass struggles. I want to elaborate on these strengths because I feel it's a shining example of what our work here in the US can lead to through remaining dedicated and optimistic. Although there's not yet a consolidated revolutionary party in Argentina, the Trotskyist left have nevertheless achieved many successes that's led them down a path to forming one in the future. One of these is the formation of the Workers' Left Front, an electoral coalition of 5 Trotskyist parties that have amassed a combined membership that numbered in the thousands. The coalition engages in tactics of revolutionary electoralism, with 5 deputies currently holding seats in the national legislature. God, that's so hard for me to say. These deputies don't bat an eye to the failed efforts of reformism, and instead they use their platform in Congress to put forth a revolutionary political program to a wider audience and protest and expose the loyalties of the rest of those serving the bourgeois state from the inside. During this ongoing wave of struggle, deputies have walked out of Congress to protest alongside their fellow comrades, workers, and oppressed folks in the street. They also only accept a salary equivalent to the average wage of a union worker, ensuring that they are in their position solely to advance the revolutionary struggle and not to line their own pockets by serving the wishes of capital, like those of the bourgeois parties. One small victory from their position in Congress alone has been helping to successfully pressure union leaders to call the national strike. In addition to their electoral work and presence in social movements, members of these organizations also intervene and agitate in their workplaces, both through means of union organizing and through organizing non-union workers without collaborating with any capitalist institutions. Many of the non-union workers mobilized to the streets were done during the strike were done through the work of revolutionaries organizing their workplaces, through talking to their fellow workers and addressing any questions or concerns about the strike, and hosting space for discussion, debate, and democratically deciding how to participate. They've also participated in helping organize the neighborhood assemblies and remain involved in using these spaces to put forth revolutionary politics and to help organize their participants and mobilize them into action. In order for the members of the Workers' Left Front parties and the rest of Argentina's left to lead a successful revolution from below, they must continue to work towards forming a revolutionary workers' party with the electoral coalition hopefully serving as its base. They must continue to recruit more Marxist cadre and increase their membership to to the tens or hundreds of thousands to be able to reach and lead the entire working class towards revolution. While this sounds like a slow and daunting process, we must keep we must keep watch of the struggle optimistically and remember Lenin's quote, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. In 1917, the membership of the Bolsheviks were in the 20,000s a month before the February Revolution. And by the eve of the October Revolution, they rapidly grew to around 200,000 members. This stage of struggle in Argentina provides massive opportunity for the consciousness of the masses to rise quickly and for the revolutionary left to grow its forces out of it. And because of this, we must eagerly keep our eyes peeled on this struggle and continue to analyze its strengths and weaknesses and its victories and defeats. In fact, the struggle has already won its first major victory, with the masses courageously defying Milei's security measures to exert enough pressure on the state to retract the omnibus bill and its 600 changes worth of attacks on workers and the oppressed. During this period, on January 31st, protesters successfully forced police in the capital to retreat while chanting radical slogans. While the fight is far from over, the fact that a single victory against the repression of the far right was won by mass militant action and supported by the left shows the dead ends of liberal and reformist electoralism when it comes to fighting the far right, while much of the left here at home is still struggling to break from. Here in the US, a militant mobilization at the level of the January 24th strike could help build a movement that can successfully combat the ongoing attacks on queer and reproductive rights, halt all US support for the ongoing genocide against Palestinians, alongside its ongoing attacks on Yemen and Iraq, and as well as win reforms on the way to revolution that can better the conditions for workers and oppressed folks, and in turn provide them with more time, more energy, and more nourishment to get involved in further organizing for proletarian revolution. We should stand optimistically and unconditionally in solidarity with the Argentinian workers and left, and support their fight against Milei and the entire bourgeois state, as well as cheer on the impressive efforts of Argentina's Trotskyists towards building a revolutionary workers' party and their interventions in the ongoing class struggle. Down with Milei, death to imperialism, socialist revolution from below in Argentina, here in the US, and internationally across all borders.